Hello and welcome to the Overly Animated Podcast, where we take animation seriously. We talk everything animation here, including BoJack Horseman, which we'll be getting into right now. I'm Dylan Hysen, and today I'm joined by Andy Potter.
Hello.
Sam Quattro.
Hello.
And Alex Bonilla.
Hola.
Today we are continuing our Season 5 BoJack Horseman recaps, this time getting into episodes 4 and 5 of Season 5, BoJack the Feminist and the Amelia Earhart story. Check out our previous BoJack Season 5 podcast. We've had a recap on the entire season, and Alex did a recap of the first 3 episodes as well, and we're going to be making our way in chunks of 1 to 3 episodes throughout the rest of Season 5. After we've already given our takes on the whole season, now we're looking back from the perspective of already having seen the entire season. So we'll be starting with the non-spoiler segment here. No spoilers past episode 5 of BoJack Season 5, but then when I say yes, spoilers, we'll be talking as if we have seen the whole season, so you should get out if you have not yet binged the entirety of Season 5. Check, overlyanimated.com for all of that. Us on iTunes at overlyanimated.com/iTunes, or our YouTube is youtube.com/overlyanimated. Okay, so BoJack the Feminist and the Amelia Earhart story. No spoilers yet. Andy, overall impressions of these 2 episodes?
I definitely think that episode 5 is stronger than episode 4. In terms of like which one I liked more. 4 was the I guess the obligatory, this is our issue we're going to deal with this season. We're going to talk about episode, like the abortion episode or the gun episode from previous seasons. And overall, I think this one kind of falls flat at places. I think the more interesting parts of this episode are the parts where we talk about the actual plot of the season and not the actual issue, which is too bad because I kind of wanted this to be good. Because obviously since we're doing this podcast, we like this issue in general. We're not like this issue, but we want to see this issue portrayed.
We're big fans of male feminism here, Andy.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
The issue is that I think the stronger parts of this episode in general are the parts like the ending where Anna brings up the tape recorder for Diane. And I think the weaker parts are the parts where we just don't go far enough with things. Because we all know how BoJack's going to react to this kind of thing being said, like, you're a male feminist. Like, it didn't go anywhere I wanted it to go. It just went to the places that I expected and just wasn't surprising, which I don't like with this show. But on the other hand, the Amelia Earhart story is just everything I want. I want Princess Carolyn backstory. I love it every time. It's heartbreaking. It's complex. I never really know how it's going to go, but at the same time, I always know that it's never going to end happily for her, and it just doesn't. And it's just heartbreaking, and I want Princess Carolyn to have something happy in her life, and it just never happens. And this episode was just great. I really loved it a lot.
Nice. Okay. Sam, what are your thoughts on 4 and 5?
They are 2 of my favorite episodes of the season. In fact, 5, in my official Sam Rankings TM, is my favorite episode of the season. Mostly because they have like that hashtag relatable feel to them, which is always the big point in things that I like, of course. BoJack the Feminist really touched on all the male feminist stuff that goes on all the time, and I think it did a really good job with that. Amelia Earhart's story touched upon, living your life and just what happens and family relationships that suck. It's great. I love it. 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. Okay. High praise from Sam here. Alex, your take on these 2 episodes.
BoJack the Feminist, I think, is probably the best of the social commentary episodes that BoJack Horseman has done so far. And I think it's because they managed to tie it into the story of the season. Whereas the previous episodes, it felt more like one-offs, whereas this episode, I think, did much better in tying it into the main characters that we have connections to, and so that makes it have a bigger impact. And while it's not as absurd as stuff like Rap Rap Pew Pew, for example, but like I think that it gets its because of that, it manages to get its message across much clearer while still being funny enough to be like a BoJack-style episode. So I really enjoyed BoJack the Feminist on second watch. And the Princess Carolyn episode is also very interesting because obviously her backstory has been sprinkled in throughout the seasons. But so whenever we get like an episode dedicated to that, it always feels like you're actually learning a lot about how she is the way she is. And so getting all these scenes, especially with her mother, like ends up revealing a lot about Princess Carolyn that just gives her a lot more depth that she needs, especially in this season. And I just really liked it a lot. But my main takeaway from rewatching is that BoJack the Feminist was better than on the first watch.
Interesting. Yeah, I really like these 2 episodes. I think they're both 2 of my favorites, although not necessarily like super top tier BoJack episodes. I disagree with 2 things that have been said. One is the BoJack is the best commentary episode. I'll definitely take Brap Brap Pew Pew and also Thoughts and Prayers over BoJack the Feminist. Thoughts and Prayers is about in the same tier as BoJack the Feminist, but I love Brap Brap Pew. I mean, I think, and I also disagree with Andy in that the plot parts of BoJack the Feminist are better than the commentary parts. I actually hate the Anna parts of this episode, and I mean, hate's a strong word. They're just boring. And anytime we're getting like these amazing quotes, which I'm gonna sprinkle throughout this podcast, this episode is the best quotes. Like the commentary parts of this episode are what makes it great. The problem is it has a bad B plot with Mr. Peanut Butter trying to be tough. And then also I think the Anna Spanakopita parts don't super integrate well into the, like, I'm not interested in the tape part of this. Like, you know, I know it's ultimately more interesting throughout the season, but in terms of just watching this episode, I'm more interested in the male feminism commentary. And I think that that's excellent. So I think that's like, those things are what's holding BoJack the Feminist back from being like a truly great episode. Whereas the Amelia Earhart story doesn't really have a bad B plot. I think like what's great about this episode is the B plot is the backstory, or depending on how you look at it, could be Princess Carolyn in the present. Like that's the A-B structure. This is the first episode where they're playing with the different narrative structures. There's like a string of episodes starting with this one through like 4 or 5 in the season. And that's why this episode's like really strong, is because there's no like, there's no really bad part. I think the plot stuff integrates pretty well with like Princess Carolyn calling everyone. I think that really works, with her character. I guess what holds the episode back for me are the parts of her in the present. I think those are like much less interesting than the flashbacks. Like the flashbacks are like what's incredible about this episode. But then her talking to Sadie in the present is fine. But it wasn't like super innovative. It wasn't like super good for me. But still overall, yeah, I think 5's going to be stronger for me, but they're both really good episodes. What are we going to get into first? I think we can get into BoJack the Feminist first here, as less meat to talk about. I don't know. Depending on how you view it. My outline is much longer for this episode. That's just because I have a million quotes in here, which I want to get into. Yeah, we talked at this is the commentary episode for the season. You know, definitely like compares to a Thoughts and Prayers from last season. The topical, but this is like a merger of a commentary on these bad boy types. This is like a Mel Gibson character, kind of directly based on him, Vance Wagner, and then also commentary on male feminism being told through men. Alex, how do you think that like kind of these concepts merge in the episode? Do you think it's like successful messaging?
I think so. Or at least I found it to be much clearer than like the gun control messages in previous season, or the abortion message in Rap Rap Pew Pew. Like this one is very straightforward, right? That the cycle continues on in Hollywood. That we have these big stories of people being called out, but then they always manage to find their way back into things, or they sneak their way in somehow. And like that's exactly how it works with Vance Wagner, that he goes on these apology tours, he does something else bad, and then he comes back in. And then Princess Carolyn is the one who provides him the opportunity, like, oh, well, we need a bad boy type, right? He fits. And so the cycle of Hollywood just continues like that. And also tying it in is the whole idea that feminism is touted as something important in society more now. But at the same time, while we consider feminism important, people are still not giving the attention to women when they talk about these things, and men when they support feminism, to the point of BoJack saying something very obvious, he gets praised for it, but something that when a woman would say, it just doesn't get that same reaction. And so that just shows the hypocrisy in society that way. So I think that this episode, in terms of integrating those messages, I think it just gets it across much clearer and much more to the point, which what I think sometimes you need for social commentary episodes like this.
Nice. Yeah, I should say we're going to get into spoilers now for the whole season. I should have put that up after the initial thoughts. So spoilers for all of season 5 of BoJack. Really, we're just going to keep talking on this subject, and it's not really a spoilers conversation. But I'm just saying spoilers are now possible for the entire season of season 5 of BoJack. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good point that the commentaries may be less muddled. I think we've talked about how BoJack has, it goes absurdist, sometimes dilutes its commentary. This episode is very much has points it's trying to make and gets there in a very direct way. Sam, did that work for you? The messaging and, the direct messaging and how it tied both the Vance Wagner and the male feminism, parts together?
I think so, yeah. I don't know, the what's his face? Vance Wagner, that guy. I don't know, it's hard to like think about because of just what's happening in this life that we're all living in nowadays. And just like, you know, what exactly is going on. And, you know, Vance Wagner is that kind of guy who does like, you know, get away with shit all the time. And you know, people like BoJack just saying, "Oh yeah, obviously you shouldn't choke women. That's bad." Blah 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 blah. That's kind of akin to just like dudes on Twitter being like, you know, stating the obvious, right? And I think that really worked for me, at least. You know, the minimum requirement for men to be seen as good in a lot of people's eyes is not to choke women or not to like do this, that, and the other, which is just what you shouldn't do as a human being to begin with. And I think that commentary was good. I think, you know, the absurdist turn that they did with that whole thing, I think it was nice.
Yeah, Andy, how about you? How did the messaging work for you?
I don't know. I'm listening to what you're saying, and I realize that I realize now that I've had a very different reaction to the episode than you three, because when I watched it, I guess, because it is funny. I recognize the episode was very funny. I agree with you, Dylan, that there's a lot of one-liners that just I was very into in this episode. But when I was getting to the message they were trying to get across, I don't know. I was just going like, yeah, that's how it is. Like, that's how, like, this is right. Like, and I guess I was more just like agreeing with the message more than into how they were portraying it, if that makes sense. And that might just be something wrong with how I viewed it, less with the episode, because I was just sitting down to binge this show and just trying to get through the show because I wanted to see it. I wanted to see how this season went. And that might have affected how I viewed this message, because I was just like, yeah, nodding along, like, yeah, I know this. This is how I view the world. I agree with the show right now. And so that might have affected it. And I don't know, because I definitely had a very different reaction to this. 'Cause I did like this stuff with Anna at the end of this episode. And I remember seeing it and it happening and being like, oh, I really want to get to the next episode now. I want to see how this goes. I'm glad this is coming back. This plot line is coming back again.
Nice.
So
you may be more into like the context of the season overall and the character arcs.
Yeah, because this, like, even when I'm saying this, because I had this effect when, like, in just watching the episode alone. Like, I'm not talking from a season perspective. I was into this when it was alone, and that's a very different reaction than it seems like you guys had.
Well, I will agree with Andy that this feels more like, rather than a message per se, like it feels like showing a spotlight on something that maybe not everyone is aware of. But if you're already aware of it existing, then the episode doesn't really present, you know, a solution or I guess like a way to move forward. It's just like, yeah, this is the way things are in Hollywood right now. And maybe to some people may not have noticed this, but maybe if you already noticed this, then you're just like, yeah, that's right, that this is how it happens. But what do you do from there? Like this episode presents it by the end of the episode, it's basically, well, yeah, put your messages in the television show run by men, or put yourself behind the men who present these messages and help them out. Like that seems to be the ending message, which doesn't feel as cathartic as maybe you would hope, considering the setup of this episode.
Yeah, in terms of this being a direct, BoJack's most direct messaging episode, I think it's even more striking when you think of it from the perspective of, there's one scene in this episode where Diane, like, literally takes out a whiteboard and lectures us on normalizing. Like, that's kind of crazy that this show is, so directly portraying a moral viewpoint to the audience. It's like, considering how we've came from season 1, where I feel like we weren't even that progressive, to now where we're literally preaching, like, having like a TED talk on this from Diane.
I thought it was great.
It was.
I mean,
I liked it. I wonder how entertaining it is. Like I certainly
like
the
they
viewpoint
managed to
it's
throw in jokes into the whole lecture thing anyway. Like it's like Ellen dancing did for gay people, or for Jimmy Fallon for lip syncing.
That like thing I've been thinking about, because I was like, why is Ellen so safe to the straight people? It's because she dances with them.
Yeah,
anyway.
I agree with the commentary, and it's also, I don't know, it's like basic commentary. It's like what Alex is saying. Like we already agree with what they're saying here. It's like, okay, yeah, this is true. This is what normalizing is. This is a good point. But I don't know, especially when I compare it to some of the compare it to the Times Up, the highly contentious Times Up stuff from the last episode of the season. I feel like humor wise, this is just like 10 tiers below anything we're doing in that episode. Like most of this stuff is it's like pretty straightforward portraying a viewpoint. I feel like this is maybe getting into the show having some trouble integrating like really funny stuff and really good progressive viewpoint stuff.
See, I think this goes back to the argument about absurdism versus topical humor, right? Because it's the same thing with Rap Rap Pew Pew. Like some people really love that episode, but then there's the other side. It's like this is just so out there that like it feels like I'm sure it's funny, but like it's not getting the message across. So like I think that's kind of just the thing with BoJack. Like it can go to one side, it goes to the other side, but those two sides don't go together. Like it's either go all the way over the top or stay on topic, but maybe the humor is more direct, more one-liner heavy.
Yeah, I think the show's capable of doing both. It hasn't really yet, but I mean, if any show on TV can do both, I think it is this show. I think this is one big thing the show can improve on moving forward, is being capable of being like super absurdist funny and having direct moral messages together. Like personally, I guess I'm much more on the absurdist side. Like Rap Rap Pew 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 to me is like 10 times a better episode than BoJack the Feminist. Like I'm in love with that episode, and I'm okay with the viewpoint being diluted. Because I think that the audience is capable of understanding what we're trying to see here through some of this kind of, absurdist layer that's being presented on top. Like, I think it coming across, crazy funny and like having this element of, over the top satire. Like, to me, that's much more successful, this over the top satire, than literally Diane, lecturing us. Although I did enjoy that too, just to a much lesser extent.
So it kind of reminds me of the show The Good Place a little bit, right? Because that's a show where it does have, those hashtag life lessons that are integrated into a really funny plot, right? I don't know. I don't really agree with your viewpoint here, Dylan, but I see what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying I'm right. I feel like it's just, a personal perspective on it. It's just what you enjoy more out of TV. I'm not necessarily making a moral statement or anything. It's just like I'm enjoying this more entertainment-wise out of BoJack.
Shut up and tell jokes.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I want from BoJack. No, but then again, I like some of the time when the BoJack is trying to be more like just simplistically like sitcom-y funny. That's when I hate it the most. So it's interesting. There's all these layers of humor humor versus like messaging that the show is getting into. One reason, getting back to this episode specifically, I think this episode would have been more successful 2 years ago. I think this episode feels old. This episode is commenting on Mel Gibson, and it feels very pre-Times Up. You can tell that the majority, and I believe I did read in an interview that this episode was written before most of the Times Up stuff happened. Why are we commenting on Mel Gibson, like a type figure, not a Harvey Weinstein type figure? Yeah.
But they kind of did do that later in the season with the sex robot, where it's kind of that absurd, like, messaging thing. They almost did it. It felt like they almost wrote that episode even. And
wait. I think this season, what it feels like to me, this season was written over like 6 months or something. This episode was written pre-Times Up. The finale was written post-Times Up. Like that's definitely what it comes across as.
Yeah.
And so,
but at the same time, I think that this episode casts a wide enough net that it still applies to the people caught up in the Times Up movement too, where it's like media is focusing on them right now as getting punished, right? But then like 6 months later, they pop up doing comedy sets and like they're trying to find their way back in. So like it's still the same thing. So I think that this episode is still just as valid before the movement as after the movement.
Yeah.
It's wide enough encompassing that it doesn't feel like it's a niche. Like I get that you're using Mel Gibson a lot, but at least to me, I think that they did a good enough job of making just be be like a generic a generic person who's been caught up in scandal.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that, like, the character I've read in interviews is based on Mel Gibson, but I agree it's directly applied. Like, you can apply it to Louis C.K. as you're hinting at now. And I think it would have been better if this character was Louis C.K. instead of Mel Gibson, but he still is enough of a generic type that it does apply to a lot of stuff that's happening now. We do get into, like sexual violence stuff with the choking women. But a lot of it is, but it's also like mixed in with general, bad boy commentary. Like it's like centered on like, oh, he's this bad boy guy getting these bad boy roles, stop rewarding. Like it's a message that encompasses a lot of things. It would have felt revelatory 2 years ago, and now it still feels applicable, but less, specific to our current times would be my point, I guess. And I think it's maybe a consequence of how long animation takes to make, and this, but it's still valid. You can still have this sort of commentary, but especially compared to like the last episode, I feel like it feels less specific. Then again, if you're someone who wasn't into the messaging of the last episode, then maybe you enjoy this one a lot more in terms of the viewpoint portrayed here. But I think there's still a lot of great commentary with Vance Wagner. I guess we can get into that stuff first. Like I said, there's kind of like the Vance Wagner stuff, there's the male feminism stuff, they intersect. I do think they integrate both of them really well into this episode. And that's like one of the stronger points here. But we see the backstory of Vance Wagner. He gets arrested in the beginning. He goes on to directly Mel Gibson tirade talking about the Jews, and then next thing is he's starring in a Sandy Koufax movie, which I thought was incredible. That's a very, very direct commentary there. Then he's on Tom Grumbo Jumbo's new show Gotcha.
Which is just in the same set. Like, is this a new show? Is it just like a segment during his new show? Or
I think he just does like 5 shows, and this is his show.
And he just sits in the same studio for like 10 hours a day, just going from show to show to show.
Yeah, I love the new guy. I love later BoJack's like, oh no, is this Gotcha? Am I the Gotcha?
He doesn't know what set he's on. It's great.
Yeah, it wasn't even clear that he was on the Gotcha show later. Yeah, I think he thought he was on a different one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love the new Gotcha thing, and it's throughout the entire episode here. We get the commentary on he's an immature child of 38. Pretty direct thing there. This tape he left for his 14-year-old daughter.
This is the Alec Baldwin thing, I guess.
Yeah. A lot of things. And then he's always standing next to someone who he offends, like the Jewish celebrity and then the Swedish celebrity later. Yeah, that's right. I hate Swedes now. And then it's we're 5 years later past that, and we're calling on him to be Filbert's partner, the bad boy character. A great intro, I think, to the episode with all of this backstory to Vance Wagner. And then we get into the stuff with the We Forgive You awards. Alex, what did you think of the We Forgive You awards?
I mean, that's the kind of direct stuff that BoJack does as jokes that I like. Like it's like oh, of course in this universe there's like an awards just for forgiveness. That makes sense.
Yeah, but we integrate Diane Cheese to write the takedown piece on him. Like the joke about Nickus and NCIS, by the way.
I think that joke was funnier before Diane called it out, because Kate and I were watching it and we figured it out like a second before Diane said it, and we thought it was really funny, and then the show explained the joke, and it was like, okay, that was you took it a step too far.
The explanation was for me because I didn't get it. It was also for me.
It was a little explaining.
Who gives a shit about NCIS?
Yeah, the funny part was BoJack was like, no, like to point out. Like that. That's a nice punchline.
Yeah. I love the thing with BoJack. He makes this stink face at the cheese at the award ceremony, and everyone's like commenting about. Everyone's trying to talk about how he was commenting on Vance Wagner and like applying his messages to him. This is like absolutely something we do. I feel like something we've directly seen recently in award ceremonies.
I wonder who about.
Yeah, what was Brie Larson, right?
Brie Larson with Casey Affleck, which is totally justified, by the way.
Yeah, and she just looked kind of upset, and then everyone's like saying what she meant. It's a great commentary on that. That's another. This episode has so many things that really do so many like specific like satire things that like really do ring true. That's another great example of that. The squawk. Have we seen the squawk before, or is this new?
I think this is new.
one of the squawk co-hosts just says squawk, and
yeah.
It's like the talk, but the squawk.
But they're birds, and then one of them is actual bird. I don't
know if they got the actual talk co-host. I don't think Shannon Osborne was in there at all.
Oh yeah, were they directly based on them? Were they voiced by? Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, BoJack is on here, and then he eventually gets a standing ovation for saying it's bad to choke women.
Yeah.
By the way, this we pointed this out in our season long thing, but this part with the choke women thing is really dark looking back on the season.
Yes, it is. Considering I finished the season last night, I forgot this happened. That is really dark.
Yeah. This is much less fun now.
Yeah.
They're all like, oh, it's refreshing to hear a man say that, not to choke women. Definitely like pretty blatant message parallel we're trying to get into here with over the top about this, but I think it's something that is rings true enough when we keep hitting on it the whole time. Okay, here's all the male feminism quotes I want to say. Okay, so first of all, BoJack says, "Is it possible that this whole time I've been an amazing feminist hero and nobody knew it?"
No.
That's great.
You fucking idiot.
Then he says, yeah, I'm a male feminist. Well, you're welcome, society.
Oh, God.
Well, I love this portion here because it ties into just how BoJack works, right? Like he's like, well, joking your wife is not bad, but he gets applause, and that's what's like, oh, okay, I got to buy into this, like because at the end of the day, it's all about him and about him getting praised, so he'll do anything that he needs to do that. In this case, it's just supporting the latest cause to him, which is this.
Yeah. It's great. So much good stuff here. And then BoJack also says, I'm just going to stay here being woke. Yeah. All these are me. These are
Dylan just always just says, I'm just going to stay here being woke.
Yeah, that's my constant state of being.
Yeah. Do you want to emulate BoJack in this episode? Do you really?
Yes, of course you do. He's an amazing feminist hero. Of course you do. Yeah, here's another one. All they need to listen to women is the right voice, a man's voice. It's another great one. It turns out the problem with feminism all along wasn't men doing it. We're much less shrill. Yeah. Diane says, just sprinkle in a few words like intersectionality or microaggressions, and Vice News will name you Feminist of the Year.
I mean, that's true. Vice News has very low standards.
And BoJack says, oh, should I wear a t-shirt that says feminism is bae? Girls love that shit, right?
Oh my God. I love his shirt. Because it said bae, like B-A-Y instead of bae. It was so good.
Yeah. Okay. So we have 3 great male feminists on this podcast in order to comment on the.
Wow. Jesus Christ. Yeah, you guys all just fucking do that.
Andy, as a male feminist, did you relate to BoJack
every day of my life, Dylan? Yeah. I tell all my coworkers, all my women coworkers, that they're lucky that I'm around to protect them and help them and advocate for them. That's what I do all the time.
Good, yeah, as you should, says BoJack here. Yeah, that's what BoJack would say. Yeah, Alex, how do you relate to BoJack in this episode?
Sigh.
Okay.
He's not a feminist. He's not there with us.
Yeah.
No. I feel weird about BoJack this episode because it once again it hits into the thing of society, right? That like right now we're in a place where people are incentivized to support causes like this. So then you get into the cynicism part of your mind, which is like, are these people supporting it because they actually support it, or because they like the praise that comes with it? And that's a thing that we do need to come to terms with ourselves deep down. And but with someone as superficial as BoJack, he's never going to get to that point in his life. He's just like, okay, well, yeah, this sounds good. I'll talk about it, sure. But like, is it something that as society we need to talk with? It's something we need to talk about.
Yeah, and of course, where there's like the layer of truth directly below the absurdist commentary here with like this is what a lot of men do. They're just like doing it for like the brownie points and like trying to appear like good people and not actually supporting. Like clearly BoJack is not actually understanding the morality of the good morality of what he's trying to portray here. He's just doing it for the applause, like we got into. I feel it's all very apparent from this episode. Sam, how do you think this episode tapped into what you've seen from men being feminist in the world?
Well, it was very accurate, I would say. Not calling out you, Dylan, of course, 'cause, you're my best friend. But it definitely is that way a lot of the time. You'll encounter a lot of dudes just being like, one day they'll be like, oh yeah, like, fuck women, blah, 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 blah. But then the next day, in order to, like, perceivably get, like, in somebody's good graces, they'll be like, oh yeah, women, the future is female, blah, 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 blah. When they don't fucking believe it. It's, like you were saying, it's like more or less for, like, the brownie points a lot of the time with a lot of dudes. And you see it just, like, all over the place. Men trying to appear progressive or appear woke or this, that, and the other because they want to get in some girl's pants, usually.
Or
I think not to, like, bring up SNL because I fucking hate SNL, but to bring up SNL, they have this good sketch from a couple years ago. It was like the male feminist sketch, where it was basically like fucking all the male, like, dudes trying to hit on Cecily Strong and just be like, hey, that guy was such a douche, but, I want to, like, eat you out, blah, 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 blah. And she's like, ew, and then, like, pushes him away and just, like, constant thing. And then, oh no, the girl actually gets into, like, the chauvinistic feminism sort of thing, where it's just like a tool to, like, fuck people at that point, which I think is just bullshit. That's not the end of the day thing. It's, treating your fellow human beings with respect and recognizing that, there is a disadvantage in this world to being a woman. And the way that things are going now, it's been, from 100, 200 years ago being like, oh yeah, feminists are fucking spinsters and they're just, going against God, blah, 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 to like, oh, they're just fucking whiny whores or they're this, that, the other, to a tool for men to sleep with women, which I think is bullshit. So that's that on that.
Yeah. And I think that even if it's not, even when it's not directly brownie points, it still is, men espousing feminism in order to, like, think of themselves as good people. It's like that rather than actually understanding, the struggles of women and, like, how it directly applies. It's just like, it's from a selfish perspective. Like, I'm like, oh, this progressive person, I'm going to think of myself as a feminist rather than coming at it from what's actually underneath. And I think this episode did a good job of portraying all of that.
And staying on this topic, this comes a little bit later in the episode, but when the quote that stuck out to me, Diane being like, being a woman is not a hobby or pet interest of mine. You get to play Joss Whedon and everyone cheers and you get to move on, but I'm still here. So, like, that's another thing that we have to consider with feminism, right? What women need to be at the forefront of it because they're the ones that are most in tune with what the issues are. The men get to support things that come in front of them, but at the end of the day, if we walk off, like, nothing happens. But the women are stuck with the issues that are still there. So that's just another big thing that maybe gets overlooked sometimes. The fact that there needs to be more attention paid to the people who are actually going through the issues in order to be able to help them. And that is sometimes something that gets lost when you're just supporting a cause because it's popular.
Yeah, I think the episode does a great job portraying that. That Diane saying that is one of the most direct things the show has ever said. So that, like, right along with her whiteboard lecture, she's just saying it's progressive discourse at large points of this episode. I think because of that, it's one of the show's most clear messages that we've had. A lot of that Diane stuff throughout the episode. Also, she's all this results in her coming on as a consultant to Filbert. And then we get
fucking Rami Malek.
Yeah, Flip says, when the show comes out, people look at the credits and say, huh, a lady worked on that show. Guess it's not sexist. And I thought that was another great line.
I want to be like, okay, not knocking down BoJack, but this episode was probably the first time I've ever actually looked at the credits, like, after the opening intro and noticed there is mostly dudes working on this, and they're doing this, and like, where does that put us in this world? Anyway,
definitely. Yeah, I mean, animation in general still too heavily male dominated. I mean, the show's a lot of female writers. This episode, I think, was written by a man. It's definitely true even of BoJack still.
And ironically, writers on this episode might even go out and be like, "Yeah, I wrote that feminist episode." Like, I don't think there are a ton of people like that, but there might be someone in the show who might do that. Like, there's a wide enough cross section there where there could be a man who worked on this show, helped write this episode, and said, "Yeah, I helped write that feminist thing." And it's just like, and it gets back to that whole thing where it's just, is this patting yourself on the back, if that's what's going on here, for just saying something that's just true, for something that should just be how it is? And it just makes me really mad that some of that stuff can happen. But I don't want to like call anyone out. I'm just saying, just people do that, and it's very frustrating.
Yeah. We also have Mr. Peanut Butter coming on as Fritz at the end of this episode.
How does Mr. Peanut Butter keep getting jobs with BoJack Horseman? Like, how does that keep fucking happening? Princess Carolyn.
Yeah, exactly. They share the same manager. That's pretty much it.
Also, he wants to work with BoJack. They're best friends.
I guess.
As I mentioned, we have Anna Spanakopita as Vance's publicist in this episode, and then Diane's like in the car with her, and then later Vance is like repeating lines that Diane said when Vance is calling out Filbert for being sexist, and he's like, I'm a feminist, and as a feminist, Filbert is. It's another thing that rings true, I think, is men just being able to say they're feminist when convenient, and espousing that viewpoint. And then later we get the thing with the tape, and that Anna plays the tape of him talking about New Mexico. Looking back from the whole season, I don't know how successful this plotline was for me, honestly. It feels just like a narrative thread throughout the season rather than something that felt organically portrayed. Like, it's like kind of Anna's role in this episode is pretty random, and her just showing Diane the tape at the end. It didn't feel very well integrated for me into the episode.
Well, initially, Anna is introduced as the publicist for Vance Wagner, and they get into this conversation where Diane has the opportunity to say things like, why are we acting as a cover for these bad people, and does that make us complicit if we're doing that? And I think that part of the episode is important to the whole narrative of the episode and the season, because it ends up building up to Diane having this giant conversation with BoJack about facing his error in New Mexico. So in the end, I think that it was an important piece to this season, because really you can't have a season that's dealing with the lines blurring between BoJack's character and BoJack's life, the storyline about the Time's Up stuff. You can't handle any of that without handling the New Mexico stuff. And I think that bringing Anna into this is the most efficient way of getting that done.
Yeah, I think it thematically ties in better than, I guess, the direct narrative thing of like her showing her the tape here. But yeah, I guess, and that's more important thematically, so it does integrate in that way. We had but episode, I think 10 was more of our BoJack commentary on him as a vehicle for other characters like him, and you're not supposed to relate to him. But I noticed that we had one line in this episode about that. We said we're not supposed to like Filbert or agree with the things he does. There's this whole discussion about is Filbert a commentary, or are we backing it up by showing him this male lead doing all these bad things? So I like that it starts here, and it's already tying into the show, and also clearly also like it's supposed to parallel BoJack himself. With this random gag of Ryan Seacrest types father's scars.
Yeah.
When BoJack leaves the interview early.
Yeah.
We should do a podcast like that.
Yeah.
Where we all leave Dylan here, and Dylan just talks forlornly about something.
I would finish the monologue. And then I think that's it. So then the last thing is the B plot of Mr. Peanut Butter he's not tough enough for the bad boy roles.
I thought that was cute, to be honest. He isn't tough enough. He's a dog.
But it kind of runs completely opposite of his actual character arc this season, because the character arc this season is him realizing he needs to change, and this is a jokey subplot about him wanting to change. And so just kind of, it feels forced, and on top of just being silly and kind of not with the rest of this episode.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to contrast with his plotline throughout the season, where it's like his peanut butter's plot in the season is, oh, he is a douchebag. But this episode is like, oh, he's too nice.
Well, like, this feels like a Mr. Peanut Butter storyline from, like, season 2, maybe.
Yeah.
It's like that SpongeBob episode, like the Weenie Hut Jr. That's basically what it was.
The Weenie, let's not compare it to the great Weenie Hut.
Dylan, that is literally what this episode was.
That Rhino guy.
I usually don't defend SpongeBob, but that is a classic SpongeBob episode. We cannot compare it to the heights of that.
Mr. Peanut Butter is also yellow.
Oh wow! Is Mr.
Wow.
Peanut Butter SpongeBob?
He could be.
Yeah, so I think this plotline's fine. Like, I do think it's cute. It's just, it feels so inconsequential. And
to be fair, this B plot is a little bit more related than other B plots because, like, it's contrasting Mr. Peanut Butter failing to be a bad guy versus an actual bad guy actor. So, like, in other episodes, it feels like the B plot is totally divorced from the A plot. At least here, there's, like, sort of a thematic connection. So.
Yeah, but I think in the messaging episode, it needs to tie in even more. Like, the pressure's on even more to, like, have something related, and it feels just it feels inconsequential. With this line of Todd talking to Estelle, though, which I thought was
I was gonna ask, what does that joke mean? Like, is there any reason for that?
She's talking to Estelle. I don't know.
Is there like a hidden pond missing?
Estelle?
Yeah, it's Estelle, like Garnet.
What?
Yeah.
Like a stuff. Oh, wow, I forgot.
That's what he said.
Well, she didn't even speak. Mr. Peanut Butter was like, "Who are you talking to?" And Todd is like, "Estelle." That's the joke. I don't know what the joke is.
Just talking to Estelle.
That's I
think the joke is that Todd's life is dumb. That's the entire joke.
Well, isn't that's Todd's
Wow,
entire
Estelle
thing?
isn't dumb.
Yeah, and I did think that, like, there's a new sheriff in town, and it's like, oh, thanks for keeping us informed. Like it's funny. It's just this to me is indicative of why the show sucks at B plots, as the season is aware of, as we directly comment in a later episode. I feel like we're directly playing with the A/B narrative.
I think this B plot would have been a lot better if it kind of touched on his ex-wife thing a little bit more. Like, instead of just dropping it on us in the party episode later, like, we got a little hint of it here, but we really didn't. We didn't go that far with it, and that might have tied better into the Vance Wagner plot.
Yeah, if possible, if this integrated better with all of this stuff. I don't know.
There's a line here where he fixes a guy's crossed eye, the paparazzi guy, and he's like, "I'm gonna go watch a Wes Anderson movie and see if I can perceive any depth in it."
Yeah, that's fine.
Burn.
Yeah, pretty standard BoJack joke, I would say.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the Amelia Earhart story. Last comments on BoJack the Feminist. We're all thumbs up to varying degrees on that episode.
Yeah, we're all woke bays.
Yeah, we're all woke bay. Yeah, I'm
Feminist AF.
I'm wearing my feminism is bay T-shirt right now. What if they started selling those? Like,
oh my god,
listeners should just assume we're all wearing that shirt at all times.
Yeah, that's basically my constant state of being.
I'm sure somebody has already put it up on, like, Redbubble or something. So.
Yeah, probably. Okay, Amelia Earhart story. Sam, this is your favorite episode of the season.
Yes.
So I think the main question is, like, what are you connecting to here? Is it this Princess Caroline backstory?
Yes, that is because. Okay, so I am not planning to adopt a child, so that is not my personal thing. But the thing of, like, growing up and not really having much and just having to deal with, like, your mom and, like, life and yada yada yada. It hit me in, like, the mother place where BoJack's mom issues did not. You know what I mean? And I just thought it was a wonderful episode. It really played well with the back and forth of, A plot, B plot, and I guess there was a C plot in the background there somewhere with BoJack just, like, killing himself, essentially.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought it worked really well, and it was a really wonderful Princess Caroline episode. Probably this and Ruthie are really on par, I would say.
It's interesting the parallel brought up with BoJack's mom, right? Because BoJack's mom has been portrayed as just not liking BoJack at all throughout his entire life. He wanted to get rid of him as soon as possible. But, like, the difference is Princess Caroline's mom, like, Princess Caroline is the last one left. Mom tries to keep her around down to the very end. Like, he has a plane ticket and she's like, hey, just stay around for one more year, And, like, that part to me is also especially relatable. The idea that, like, the mom has a preferred person to stay around and help her do all her things. And like they want to keep you around no matter what, but at the same time, you know personally that if you stay, you're just going to keep staying. Like the next opportunity, you never know when it's going to come to finally make your own life. And that's the thing that with Princess Carolyn, it fits very well, and they built very well in this episode. Like even from her housekeeper days, like always wanting to go forward, make things happen. But like she also has the mom to worry about, and that's a very real dilemma that a lot of people go through, myself included. And so that part is really what makes this episode stand out to me, that the relationship that they managed to build up between Princess Carolyn and her mom.
Yeah, it's a great point about how it's a different type of a mom relationship than BoJack's, and I think these are two things that a lot of people have related to and apply to a lot of people's lives. And yeah, I think it does seem like a really great portrayal of this, and like the mom at the end being like, "Can't you just do this one thing for me?" And like, just not, yeah.
And you know, it's not going to be just that one thing. Like,
yeah, it's going to be more things.
Yeah. All of that, you know, and her just being like abusive at times, and then like, just really like saying like she needs her there, and like, being supportive at times too. Yeah, all of that is just like heartbreaking. And, these backstory parts I feel like are incredible. Like on their own, some of the best parts of the season. And another thing that like I think is really incredible about the Princess Carolyn backstory here is how it is portraying this completely new dynamic with her that we didn't really know about in terms of the relationship with her mom, but also integrating what we did know about her backstory, like the necklace in particular. That's like the main thing I feel like we've seen from her past, and how that integrates into her relationship with her mom. I think it's just brilliant. It like really like portrays this holistic viewpoint of this character that I think enhances an already, really character. There's a lot of depth to it. And I'm always impressed where I'm sure that they didn't have this backstory planned for this character, like even 2 years ago, you know, this is new stuff. So I'm always like really hugely impressed when we can like come up with this new things that just like enhance what we know about the character already.
Well, it wasn't.
They did bring it up, and what was it?
Well, like best thing that ever happened.
Yeah.
She mentioned something about having to cover for her drunk mom all the time, and like that's how she learned how to cook. Like I remember that part very specifically as
yeah,
like,
me too.
Okay, this is finally coming back here.
Okay, so yeah, expanding on some breadcrumbs we've
it could be retconning, but like the point, I think that in this episode they do a very good job of you're right, to incorporating details that we already knew about Princess Carolyn's life, but finally putting them like in visual form. Like, okay, so now we're actually seeing her past life roll out, as we've done for so many other characters in this show so far.
Yeah. I think like if you want to say this is the strongest Princess Carolyn episode, I think that's definitely valid, because I think it's at least the strongest character episode for her. Like I think like Ruthie maybe hits like emotionally harder depending on who you are. This episode is like, you know, just seeing how she got to who she is. I feel like this is a character I've struggled to connect to in terms of what we've gotten up with her in the present. It's always felt a little bit, typical. To me, things that haven't had a lot of depth to it. This is like pure depth, I feel like, that we're adding to this character. So just for me, just could even be the most valuable episode this season in terms of enhancing the show overall, I feel like. The parts, yeah, Andy.
Oh, I was just going to say, in talking about Ruthie in this episode, Ruthie, I think what this episode lacks is that it doesn't have the same gut punch that Ruthie ends on, which sticks with you a lot longer. And so it just, I think you put a lot of weight into Ruthie just based on that last line from Princess Carolyn. And this episode instead goes for more of just a slow burn of an end, because you know going into this episode things aren't going to go well for Princess Carolyn, because that's just how it always goes. And so it just more draws out the moment of the train wreck that you know is going to happen. So it's just a very different viewing experience. I think it makes a much better overall episode, but doesn't leave as much of a lasting impression at the very end, I think.
Yeah, Ruthie is like this gut punch twist at the end.
Yeah.
Whereas this episode is also a gut punch with "can't you just do this one thing for me?" and like her trying to stop her from leaving, but it's not unexpected. It's like, yeah, this is what this is. And that's heartbreaking on its own, right? It's like, oh yeah, definitely. I know this is going to be disappointing, and it is disappointing, and like, wow.
Everybody just has really sad lives.
Well, and it's interesting because to me, I didn't even get the sadness part of it because obviously, that Princess Carolyn ends up making a life for herself. Like she ends up becoming an agent, a manager. So in the end, this ends up being a positive for her. In that moment, obviously, it's sad, but because of how this episode portrays their mother-daughter relationship, it ends up feeling more like you had to do this moment rather than a feeling bad for a moment. And so. Like at least to me that helps because like Princess Carolyn, like seeing her make decisions earlier in her life that made her the person she is today, and like a person that is probably in the whole better off than what she would have been if she made herself stuck in that situation for longer than she needed to be. Like that feels uplifting in a way almost.
Really, you viewed it that way, Alex? Because I took it completely different than that, because in my opinion, when we're watching Princess Carolyn go up through the ranks of manager and agent and trying to get a kid, it's just like it really emphasizes what not wrong, and that's the wrong word for it, but just what she yearns all the time. And the fact is that every time she gets something more, it's not the thing she actually wants, or it's not the thing that she thinks she wants. And it really shows that her with her mom and her now really have the same problem. They want something and they just can't get it. And it's just depressing that 18 years separated, she still has that problem with her life. And it's just heartbreaking.
And that's a fair interpretation. But at the same time, you wonder was the alternative just staying stuck in the same place and her having Like, when you think of what the alternative would have been, it's like, no, that would have been even worse than where you are now. So, it's obviously a comparative thing, but I agree with you that.
Though. I don't know if you can grade life comparatively. You can only really grade what you have now. We can't really guess what would have happened if she had stayed there. And we could say, like, she stays there and everything just stays how it is. Like, she just stays with her mom and just does cleaning all the time. But we don't know that's what's going to happen with her. I don't think it's fair to extrapolate like that with her life, because we can only really grade what we have 5 seasons of grading her life in Hollywood compared to 1 episode of her with her mom. I don't know if that's something we can do.
Yeah, I think the interpretation Alex provides of this is actually like kind of like a happy ending, in that like she stands up for herself and she says, "No, I'm going to LA. Like I'm not going to stay here with you despite you wanting me to." I think that could be viewed as like an empowering happy ending. And then Andy on the other hand is saying, "Well, yeah, that's true, but she's still not happy now." And that's really depressing on its own right too. Mm-hmm. So it's like it's this really happy moment, but still we know her life is kind of tragic in the present too.
But now she's unhappy in LA.
Yeah. So Sam, how did you view the ending with "Can't you just do this one thing for me" and her actually flying away? Did you see it as happy, heartbreaking? I
thought it was heartbreaking for mom, obviously, because empty nest syndrome, etc., etc. For Princess Carolyn, I think it was a really empowering thing. I think it was, something that she needed to do for herself, obviously. And while in the present day, while she isn't completely 100% happy and she has a lot of problems in her life, it definitely set her up for the better. She's not stuck in North Carolina and she's not, basically taking on the maid job again. She's not doing this, that, and the other. She's by the, what do you call it, it's like you don't really want to compare your life to other people's in terms of, oh yeah, I live in LA and I'm a manager and that makes me more successful than being a fucking maid in North Carolina, blah blah blah. And that's just not a good way to think. I don't think
so. I think the episode itself is trying to answer what you guys are commenting on here, and I think it's trying to say that she is better off now because we see her in the present and she's really good at her job. That's something that the episode is portraying really well. Wow, you can sell things to everyone. The episode is constantly she's taking calls from people, she's solving problems, she's enjoying it. I think the episode itself is telling us the answer to that, which is that she is happier, she is better off for having left.
Well, at the same time, I think another thing to highlight here is when at the end, when Sadie and Princess Carolyn get into the fight, Princess Carolyn lets out something along the lines of, "I'm gonna let this baby have a better life," and Sadie's like, "What do you mean better?" Because like in Sadie's eyes, Princess Carolyn is someone who just left North Carolina for Hollywood, and that alone made Princess Carolyn in her eyes a better person. But I think the flashback does important work in emphasizing that it's not just the fact that she left a maid job. Like, you can be happy in a maid job, it's fine. But it's also the fact that she was stuck in a manipulative relationship with her parents. She wasn't able to she didn't have total control over her own decisions. And also to the point with the Wallaces too. Like, she was going to get married, but because the Wallace parents wanted her to get married, not necessarily because she made that decision. So I think that both sides are valid, obviously, and like what kind of life would you prefer? But at the same time, like, I think that this episode does a really good job of, when you're talking about who has a better life, or what decisions in your life made your life the way it is today. Oftentimes we're missing context when we make judgments like that. And it's important to consider that when thinking about different people. Sadie doesn't have that context of what kind of family Princess Carolyn came from, and that's why she's like, well, what do you mean better? Like, just because you live in Los Angeles. But in Princess Carolyn's side, it's like, no, I'm gonna raise the baby differently than how I was raised, and that in itself is a huge thing in order to give someone a better life. So I just love that kind of a contrast emphasized in this episode between like just the idea of leaving somewhere and as opposed to leaving a relationship dynamic that defines what kind of control you have over it.
Yeah, it's a great point about how the episode also comments on that with that line from Sadie. The episode very nuanced in saying, like, neither lifestyle necessarily better. Yeah, Princess Caroline would raise her better relative to how she was raised. I think it's like in general, neither is better, but for Princess Caroline, this was a good thing, I think, is what the ultimate takeaway we get, which was her, her leaving was a good thing, as we see her, being relatively happy in her manager job. So
this is a really sticky issue, I say.
And I think the fact that we've brought up like multiple sides and viewpoints to this, and we've had direct lines and quotes from the episode to support them shows how strong this episode is and how much depth there is to it. Like, there's just so many areas that the episode itself gets into. This isn't even our building on top of the episode. We're literally just talking about what the episode is presenting us. That's why BoJack, I think, is an amazing show. Like, this is something we're really not able to do with many other shows on TV. The parts of Princess Carolyn's backstory, we've covered, I think, most of them. I think also just her watching the Amelia Earhart movie. I think that's really great.
Oh,
yeah.
Quoting it, yeah. I think
feels.
Yeah. And we have her thing with the Cooper, the Wallace son, and she gets pregnant and then has her miscarriage, and I think how that relates to her present situation as well. Also really heartbreaking.
I also think that this is also another moment in the season because they really harp this season on the main cast are all just kind of circling the drain, just doing the same thing over and over again. And this is Princess Carolyn's moment to show us that she's kind of doing the same thing over and over again. She's trying to have a baby. She has a miscarriage. Her life she feels really bad and she tries to have a change. And that's just what she's doing over and over and over again, trying to get happier, trying to find that thing that gets her a kid or gets her a better position in her job, and so she can be more stable, so she can have a kid, so she can get more stable. Like, and it's just the same cycle over and over again, and that it really hurts. Her cycle, I think, hurts me the most. I don't know why.
It really hurts. Andy's review of BoJack in general.
Yeah.
It wasn't this episode where somebody said, "Hey, just because you can't have a baby doesn't make you less of a woman," or whatever.
Yeah,
that was another episode, right?
Yeah, I think it's another episode. But
well, I think that's a good point. I think that's for Princess Carolyn in general, especially like seeing this episode and seeing like how her mom interacted with her when like she was pregnant and just like her whole family stuff. I think that was a great point to bring up. Like, just because you can't have a baby or maybe you're not ready to adopt or this, that, and the other doesn't make you less of a woman.
But it makes her less Princess Carolyn, and that's the point. It's something she wants, and so for her, it's just heartbreaking. I never want a kid, never, but she does, and so this is part of her life that's been torn from her without any choice from her. So I get that there's like, it's completely fine if a woman doesn't want to have a kid, but there has to be some consideration that she wants it. And I don't know. I don't know what else to say about it.
Well, it's a good point for Mandy there, and I think that this episode I've had trouble connecting to Princess Carolyn's desire to have a kid. Same things as Andy's getting into, and I think this episode enhances it a lot in terms of like giving us more context for that.
Well, and this show is also, like, again, hammering parental influence, right? Because, like, her mom's first reaction is, you blew it. So, like, putting the fault on her for the miscarriage. Yeah. And that's something that sticks with her throughout her life. Like, whenever she gets these miscarriages, she ends up putting the blame on herself. But, like, we see that it begins from the first time. And so that's something that sticks in her mind, something she wants to overcome because maybe to prove something wrong. But like, just seeing it happen for the first time and coming from someone as close as your mother, like it helps. It helps give an extra layer as to why Princess Carolyn feels that way in like season 4 when that happens.
That was probably the roughest part of the episode for me. Was her mom like starting to berate her after she tells her she had a miscarriage. Like, it's just absurdly abusive. It was really bad. Yeah. And then in the same scene, she turns it around, like, and then starts supporting her and comforting her, like, seconds after. Just that the people being capable of doing both and, like, it feeling like a realistic portrayal of that in a mother-daughter dynamic. I mean, it's just like heartbreaking.
God, Dylan, haven't you seen Lady Bird?
Yeah, I think that's a good comparison. This and Lady Bird. I think there's a lot of similarities.
It's exactly the same thing, except minus the miscarriage stuff.
Right. I mean, it's like even like the Princess Carolyn mom here probably like worse in a lot of areas, but like that's like one of the strengths of Lady Bird is like portraying them fighting and then being like really sweet the next moment.
That's just how it be sometimes.
Yeah, and I think Lady Bird shows it as like kind of normal and like affectionate like viewpoint of that, and this is like this is abusive and terrible viewpoint of it, but both are like kind of sides of the same coin.
Both
maybe
are valid.
I don't know. Both are like things that happen. Yeah.
Just speaking as a girl who has had issues with my mom, TM, I think both sides are valid on that.
Yeah, it's just this incredibly, I think, complex thing that the show is capturing in, and also like this is like capturing it in 22 minutes, even less with other stuff happening in the episode. And Lady Bird is like having this whole movie to talk about it, and BoJack is like also like equally successful. I think that's just incredible. Yeah, okay. I guess the other stuff in the episode is the stuff from the present with Sadie. Later as we learn, this is all relevant as she is going to adopt Sadie's porcupine child later, and the flea market meeting the family. It was kind of weird when Strib comes in. He's just like this porcupine. I'm like, okay.
I'm sorry. I need to comment on that, Dylan, because we watched that last night. We finished the season. We turned it off. It sat there for like a minute, and Kate turned to me and said, "Can we talk about how a porcupine came out of a human vagina?"
Okay, I asked this question too.
Yeah, Alex did.
Like, it's a strange thought.
Apparently, was it you, Alex, or was it somebody else? They looked it up. Apparently, when porcupines are born, their needles are soft. But this porcupine baby had needles.
Full needles.
Blanket. So, like, that's just
mysteries of the BoJack Horseman.
You know what? Maybe she had a C-section.
Look,
but you didn't think
there's a lot of questions about how animals work with humans here.
Oh my god!
But yeah, the meeting the family. So yeah, Sadie calling her out as we talked about. Princess Carolyn tells her to do what's best for her. We Tracy appearance in this, telling Princess Carolyn Sadie said no. And then I thought these parts were less strong, basically. Although still pretty good too.
There were good freeze frame moments.
Freeze frame moments.
Yeah, like the T-shirt in the flea market. It was like stop, pause, let's watch the show.
Oh yeah, okay. The pause and post on Reddit. Yeah.
I don't. Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
No, okay. My thing is just I don't get how Strib is a nickname for Dennis.
Yeah, we no one gets it.
I think that's a Southern thing, right? Like nicknames that have nothing to do with the real names. I feel like that's a thing.
Yeah, we also kind of get into that with the Trey, Coop, yeah, like all that.
Yeah. But, also in the flea market, there's a good side stuff I stole to make money to buy heroin.
Yeah,
That's just how it be sometimes.
Good background stuff. The other parts of this episode, the sign from your favorite star gag with BoJack, that came back a few times, and then BoJack, the plot advancement, BoJack fired his stunt double, doesn't want to do the motorcycle stunt, then falls off the roof, and then he's in the hospital at the end with
and he dies.
And he died, yeah. And also what day is it right now.net, says Todd. Day page. I thought that was good. I think this episode just integrates all the like plot stuff of her calling everyone, and then just that all coming like tying together and also like advancing the plot, and then BoJack like being hurt and on medication, like, and that's starting his pill addiction. It's seamlessly tied into this episode and into the season as a whole. I think it's fantastic. Honestly, us talking about it, I've just convinced myself that this episode is a lot better than I thought it was before, because that's incredible. The B with her in the present is fine, and then there's so much depth to these flashbacks. Like, this is just such a great narrative episode. Like, I'm super impressed here.
I forget. Does BoJack end up blaming Princess Carolyn for the injury later on, or no?
No, he thanks her for letting him get injured because everyone.
No. In this episode, yes, because he's hopped up on painkillers. But I mean, like later on in the season, is there a discussion about that? Because I feel like that's something that we have to talk about, right? Like she's going to do this thing with the baby, but because of that, like, and her not really paying attention to what the people are saying, like BoJack ends up in this situation.
He does say something. It's when he's in the trailer with the manta ray. He says he gets snippy with her about it, and he says like, "You're gonna be a great mom. You like left me here and got me injured," but then he apologizes and goes to sleep. Like he realizes right when he says it that he's in the wrong, and so it never really goes more than that. I don't think.
Okay, no, I just find that interesting. Like it begins here, with, like BoJack's like true spiral into like his sobriety ends here at this episode.
Yeah, and it's through Princess Carolyn's desire to keep the production moving quickly, that does ultimately put BoJack in that bad situation, that she, as his friend, should have recognized that this is not something that would be healthy for BoJack, him being on all this medication. But at the same time, it's definitely still BoJack's fault.
Yeah, it goes with like the thing she said to her mom. Like, it's not, at some level, it's not her entire responsibility it's not her responsibility that BoJack strangled Gita at the end of the season.
Yeah, it's not her fault. She did bring about that position. Definitely not. It's definitely BoJack's fault, and he's terrible.
Yeah. I actually like this episode for like Sadie noticing these things, because I feel like a lesser show might have like kept Sadie as like a comedically backwoods hick character, so to speak. But like at the end, it's like, I've seen you bullshitting the people everyone is called. Like you say you like my clothes, but you didn't like make any effort to like get anything from me out of it. So like I appreciate Sadie's portrayal in this episode, especially on second watch. Like just her not being portrayed as the classic backwoods character, but like someone who is more perceptive than Princess Carolyn is giving her credit for.
Yeah, I think Sadie's portrayal is also, really good in all those ways. Okay, I'm tentatively moving this up to my number 2 episode of the season. That's pretty big.
My favorite gag of this episode. It was like what?
We didn't say it yet?
No, we didn't. It was so the Cooper family, whatever the fuck their last name is, Wallace, whatever.
Oh, is it the answering machine empire?
The answering machine empire.
Oh my god!
And then like the dad is like, "Well, you could always marry Samantha Floppy Disk," and I was like, "That's so great." I wish I personally went by Samantha, so I could just make my Discord name Samantha Floppy Disk.
You should make it that. It's a good name. Okay,
I don't.
Well, maybe Samantha goes by Sam for short. Sam Floppy.
Yeah, Sam Floppy Disk. That's Samantha Floppy Disk's take on the episode. Andy, final thoughts on both episodes?
I had a different reaction to 4 than you guys. I really enjoyed listening to that. You guys connected with that a little bit more. I wanna watch it again now, 4 again, just to see if I feel a little different about it. But 5, man, it's just tough. I think I'm having a bigger reaction just talking about it now than even just watching it, because there's just so many different layers and different ways you can look at this episode, and just I'm excited to rewatch the season at some point. Yeah, really.
That was a great episode to talk about. We got into a lot of depth there in our discussion. Yeah, Alex, final thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, we don't get as much as Princess Carolyn as maybe we want to, but that makes these episodes feel all the more special, you know? Like when we finally get like Princess Carolyn focused episodes, and especially like BoJack Horseman does so good at backstory episodes. I feel like it's very rare when a backstory episode backfires on this. So like adding backstory plus Princess Carolyn just makes it a very special episode. So I agree that talking about it just like unearths like all the depth that is in that episode and is definitely one of the strong points of this season. And yeah, in BoJack the Feminist, it's the social episode. I still stick to being a very funny episode on top of being a pointed, focused episode, and so that's why I will probably be on the higher end of opinions on it, just because at least to me the humor landed, and I like the focusedness of it.
The Amelia Earhart story this season's the old Sugarman place. Yeah, I think there's a lot of comparisons there as backstory episodes. Past and present parallels. Both incredible episodes. Sam, final thoughts on these two?
Obviously Amelia Earhart episode. Great, wonderful, beautiful, mwah, like a nice
Mwah.
Dish. BoJack the Feminist, beautiful episode as well. The one thing we didn't really touch on that I brought it up in the recap thing, but Diane's whole thing, with BoJack talking about, if you are friends with a guy who is just doing all this bad shit, like you are kind of complacent in that and you're kind of like encouraging it. And her thing with like girl crush and like, oh, if I cover this, guys are just going to call me like a dumb slunt, blah, blah, blah. I thought that was very hashtag relatable, as we all know. So that's kind of, that commentary is what kind of lifted it up for me. The Diane side of things, you can't take a break from being a woman on the internet, unfortunately. But it just, it is what it is. So I liked it. Thumbs up.
Nice thumbs up. Okay, so yeah, two great episodes here. Let us know what you thought of BoJack the Feminist and the Amelia Earhart story in our comments, overlyanimated.com, or on our YouTube, youtube.com/overlyanimated. We'll be continuing our BoJack season 5 recaps. Not going to be as quickly as the turnaround on this one versus the last one. Over the next few weeks, we'll get the rest of the season out and find all that out at overlyanimated.com. Make sure to subscribe to our BoJack feed on iTunes to not miss any of that. You can also talk about BoJack with us on our Discord, overlyanimated.com/Discord. So the number one way to support us is via our Patreon. Patreon.com/overlyanimated. Thank you very much to all of our current patrons, especially our patron of the podcast, Brendan, aka Kells, and thanks as always to our patron executive producers, John, Ryan, Steve, Alex, and Hugh. We will be, check out other stuff at overlyanimated.com. We'll be back with more BoJack, of course, but we also have other stuff, up, including, Hilda, a new Netflix show, a lot of Netflix stuff.
Many things.
Last weekend. Big Netflix animation, month, a lot of great shows here. BoJack. Especially. So, all that at overlyanimated.com. Thank you guys very much for listening. We will see you next time. Bye.
Adios.
Bye.
Bye.